Your carriage, my lady.
The hat?
Of course. Anyone can go by horse or rail, but the absolute best way to travel is by hat.
When the men on the chessboard get up and tell you where to go, and you've just had some kind of mushroom, and your mind is moving low, go ask Alice. I think she'll know.
A topic which is quite crucial, connected about Amanita Muscaria and the topic about pharmaceuticals and medications. And it's all connected with one topic, actually. It's connected with the topic of healing and the development of our soul. So when, as I see many people need some guidance and assistance in understanding these questions deeper. So based, for example, by the Ayurveda knowledge in the Chinese, we know, ancient Chinese medicine, we know that every sickness is a reflection of a conflict that is happening inside of ourselves between our soul and our mind or our avatar. So our soul is not controlling fully this physical body.
So here you see that there's a pattern forming in the center. If I put my finger in, you can see what happens, that it actually disturbs the pattern completely. The pattern's now gone, it's gone into chaos. If I take my finger out again and leave it for a second or two to restabilize, you can see that the pattern starts to come back again.
And so this is a depiction. How do we transition out of systems rooted in domination and exploitation? And how do we work on transition pathways to life-centric ways of living, being, and knowing? Our culture is very sick with the disease of accumulation and hoarding. And how do we actually liberate capital in these times before as Eleanor often will say, before the day the dollar dies, or while we still have this wealth, how do we liberate it in service of life? So we went with a mandala because it's a journey in and a journey out. And so we really look at this mirroring this fractal nature of the inner and outer journey. And so we can start with what we've been speaking to a little bit over on the left of the water. And so there's this connection between the water element and the fire element. That's this axis that we talk about called restoration. And on the water piece, we're speaking to solidarity with Indigenous peoples who are often protecting many of where the world's biodiversity is in the forests, who have sometimes intact lineages where, we have elders that we have the honor of being in relationship with who still speak the animate language that is many fewer nouns and much more verbs. And that's important in terms of the animate way of living and knowing. And we speak about this with examples of what the work is that you can see here up on the screen. And what I want to point to in this moment is why we talk about on this axis solidarity. We recognize with what we were speaking about before with this disease of wetiko, what is it actually to have to do our inner work to know what it is to walk in solidarity with Indigenous peoples. So it's not reifying, it's not glorifying, it's not what I see in the state that I come from, the state of California, that is, oh, we need traditional ecological knowledge for now our fire mitigation. So we're going to take what you've done and put it into all of our biodiversity and all of our practices. So we now have a state policy. That's another form of exploiting and transactionalizing rather than actually walking in solidarity to do the deeper restorative work of restoring our relations with life, getting into reciprocity and kinship. So that's this left side. The right side of that same axis is the fire element. And this is where we look at that solidarity, that same notion with social movements, and in particularly movements that are being led across the geopolitical South, where the world's majority are often having to navigate the consequences of capitalism and exploitation in a daily way, whether it's the lack of water, whether it's like the lithium mining contracts that are going like crazy in Bolivia and other places. So here we're speaking about how capital can be used to buttress and to walk in solidarity with the social movements. So you can see some of the various notions that we're speaking to here. And so if you look at that axes as restoration and solidarity, this is also what is necessary to return energy back into the soil, if you will, so we can work on the other axes, which is the one that we call transformation, like moving into a state change, an alchemical state change, and creation. And so at the top of that is what Alnor was speaking of before, of the creation or creating new ancient emerging cultures. And here we're looking at, like, what is it? As we did the research for the book, it was striking that we spoke to so many people, and there's a sincere dearth of the collective imaginary of what are ways that we can live some of these values that we are invoking with post-capitalism. And we recognize that there's a need for narrative work and hacking and working at the memetics. There's a need for artists to come together who often have this visionary way of seeing what could be, working with educators and shamans and kind of dreaming this air element, this vision state of what new ancient emerging cultures could be. And that the base of that transformational and create access is the earth. And this is where Alnor was speaking a little bit about what is it to create post-capitalist infrastructure. And here we're looking towards bioregional sovereignty, education, health, cultural sovereignty, that actually is what we often think of in this material form, those things that are actually getting outside of the nation state, or where we're moving into corporatocracy or some dystopia AI future. This is where we're looking at what is it and how resources can actually flow now for not ownership of land, but to support bioregional food, cultural, water, health, education, cultural sovereignty. So, and at the center of all of this in the mandala is the element of ether. And here we're speaking about recultivation life force itself. And so when we look at what the condition of this cancer of Wetiko, what the condition of hundreds, thousands of years of exploitation have done, in a way it has separated us out of actual work to be in the dance with life force, to be, and when I say eros, I'm not just speaking sexual energy, I'm speaking of that which every bee, every flower, every tree is in relationship with. And so here we're pointing to work with trauma and reconciliation. And I want to say that when we're speaking about trauma, it's not just to transactionalize it, to work on our trauma so we can be better citizens in modernity. It's both acknowledging the wound and the epigenetic lineages of this, and it's also sometimes honoring the gift of that puts us back into right relationship with life and death. This is where we see resurgence of mystery schools, rites of passage work, many different ways of being and knowing that are cultivated. And we see this at the heart of this whole mandala, because it's not just that you can go, if say I'm a wealth holder, to say, okay, I'm going to go and I'm going to purport that I am in solidarity with Indigenous people and here's the monies. What we're also trying to point to is this ontological change, this way of working that's humbling ourselves with. It's what we do, but it's the manner by which we approach it, how we do it, that is part of what we're trying to point towards in this mandala.
I see actually it happens that the last bullet point on the last thing that you addressed was, as a possible area of work, psychedelic medicines, especially those rooted in traditional culture.
The bigger issue, the isolation of alkaloids is a symptom of a particular ontology. And the particular ontology is that we are entitled, as Westerners, to extract historical, traditional, cultural knowledge of wisdom-keeping traditions, and that we are entitled to commodify plants and fungi to alleviate our psychological, spiritual ennui and trauma. And that entitlement is the source logic of neoliberalism. And what I would argue is that what will come of that is a direct result of how we approach the relationship, like any other relationship. And so there might be some short-term healing, and there is going to be long-term devastation. Everything from creating unsustainable growth trajectories for these plants to psychotic breaks from people who are taking these plants without an embedded cultural context. And, you know, like unsupervised, unparented children, every attempt to grasp more creates more drama and more trauma. And that's the cycle we're in. And so, yeah, some people will get benefits, some people will, achieve states of enlightenment. And what I'd say is, like, consciousness is temporary, right? When we, especially when working with plant medicines, right? This is not equivalent to sitting in a dark cave for 40 days and manually, endogenously releasing DMT in your body through meditation, mantra, yantra, tantra, etc. Like, this is not equivalent. What they're great at is shortcutting those experiences so our body can get cellular reminders of what those states are like in order for us to build back our own scaffolding. And so they provide some organic scaffolding, and then there's work to do. And so if we don't have a cultural context in which we have elders, in which we have intact cultures worthy of the word culture, and we don't have ancient relationships that can be mediated by people who understand how to best integrate this knowledge, then we get these like short-term blips of consciousness that appear as almost like manic depressive bouts and episodes. And so what psychedelics can also do is amplify our delusions. And so, if you enter psychedelic space with, well, I paid $300 for this ceremony, and therefore I must get my 2 purges and my 4 insights, and the way Westerners approach ceremony, what it's going to do is it's going to amplify your existing ontology. So unless there's parallel decolonization work and deprogramming and deconditioning happening as active spiritual political praxis, we're just going to replicate the same old shit. And that's what we're doing, right? And then people will say, well, ayahuasca told me to create my own nutraceutical company. And, because of course, a Silicon Valley person who only understands commodification, entrepreneurship, and the VC model is going to see the world through that lens, a man with a hammer and all of that. And so I think this is part of why I think self-reflexivity and accountability and responsibility and sobriety are necessary preconditions to enter a merger with plant consciousness, because they are deities and they are gods, and we have to understand the etiquette and the decorum of approaching a deity accordingly.
Since it's quite a hot topic in the industry right now, as far as I understand it, and I think since you mentioned in the article, just any words specifically on this this attempt to try to remove like the spiritual visionary, like entheogenic component of the substances, so that they just have their kind of medical therapeutic effect. It sounds like a bizarre idea to me, but like,
yeah, it's the logical outcome of a prepubescent mindset, right? It's the equivalent of, it's the Diet Coke logic. Let me get all the benefits without any of the calories, right? And the most interesting part of the entheogenic experience is to enter altered states. Like, that's the whole point, right? The physical, psychological benefits, especially to indigenous cultures, these were tertiary, right? These were the result of ontological shifts, right? As we said earlier, right? Culture is an agreed upon set of delusions, but it's totalizing, right? So we're all kind of stuck in the machinations of dualism and separation and materialism. And so the aim is to get to non-ordinary state in order to see culture, and in order to see also the culture of ourselves, which is identity, right? Small s self, ego, identity, and transcend, at least temporarily, that ego and that culture, so you could have this larger vantage point. You can access the cosmic mind, would be the kind of idealist way or panpsychist way to think of it. And then re-enter a more mature, sober human being. right? The point of psychedelics was to grow up, not to have a trip. And so, because part of the sort of misunderstanding of the Western mindset is like, well, the trip is the problem. And so you have this weird bifurcation where some people are like trip junkies, and then the kind of sober rationalists want to avoid the trip. And it's like, neither of those are the point. The disorientation from visual effects, from the more psychedelic aspects, was to disrupt the patterns of normality in order for us to have a better grasp of a living, animate universe and cosmos that is stranger and more complex and more queer than we can understand.
Mushroom symbolism, this anthropomorphism of the mushroom to the god, not the man to the mushroom, but the mushroom as incarnated as the story and the mythology of a man. It's like the deification of the beast, because we are the beast. Yeah. According to these ancient gods that created us, we're the beast, and they called us the beast. And so this is when you have the anthropomorphism of a mushroom as a man, you have the creation of and the raising of the image of the beast. Go through different stages of the sun. There's different stages of enlightenment, meaning how much we know about the mushroom on the planet. How many people, like these ancient myth-raidists, are actually out there getting together in groups and eating and studying the mushroom to find out what it does. This is the stage of enlightenment we move into. As we go over here, now we go into a stage of darkness. Now this is a 65,000-year cycle in Egypt. They take this one day and turn it into a 65,000-year cycle, and we are right here coming out of the Amen state. This state down here, it goes through all different names of states, but when the sun sets, it goes into a state of darkness that's called the Amen state. And as this happens, we go through 8,000 years of darkness, or no knowledge of the light of day, the Son of Man, the Son of God, the mushroom, no knowledge of that on the planet. It's withheld, it's hidden. And that's why this is called the Amen state, because Amen means the hidden. Now we're going through the hidden state, and eventually we're going to find out about the mushroom as it comes up and the horse is risen and the knowledge comes back into the planet, and we move into an enlightened state. Now that may not sound very scientific, but that's what the mythology is.
So this is a post by Adam Lewington, Reindeer Amanita. Here's a screen capture of the movie Alien from 1979, where Sigourney Weaver gets out a keyboard near the end, and this is what appears on the keyboard. In case you did not know, Fly Garrick is the most popular name for Amanita Muscaria. Trip? To where? We know that Hollywood is nothing more than a Masonic block laying pinion for sorcery and esotericism, to which they allow so many truths to hide under our noses, as they laugh at us. So, what was Alien truly about? The movie begins with a panning shot over Saturn. This is important because Saturn rules the world of fungus in medical astrology. Medical astrology being the only true medicine system. As even the father of Western medicine states, a physician without knowledge of astrology has no right to call himself a physician. Nothing could be more true. Saturn is the planet of death, hence Amanita, opening up and allowing us to take a deep quest into this realm. The movie continues and plays out with people running from demons. Could these be the inner demons that Amanita makes us face? This movie encapsulates the cast receiving visions from the dream realm that can be used to reshape their future.
The Ankh is one of the symbols for the mushroom, and the gods feed the man again the Ankh, and that's how he becomes enlightened. They go into the state that's called the Amenta state, or the outer world, the out of the world state. Stand right in front of this, and he's holding the Ankh to his mouth, and he's standing there like this. This is Amen, which also sounds like Amanita, Amen, and then his consort's name is Amanit, we got Amanit, and he's getting ready to go into a state by taking this on and drinking the waters. So he's going to go into an out of the body state that's called Amenta. The state of mind that he's going into, the delve into the underworld, is called the Amenta. And this is the symbol for Amenta in Egyptian hieroglyphs. If you look, it looks like a mushroom, obviously, but it's got this, which indicates that the mushroom is on a mountain. It's the difference between whether the mushroom is in the valleys or whether it's on the mountain.